Today, there are 2 million descendants of French-Canadian immigrants living in New England. These are our stories. Welcome to the French-Canadian Legacy Podcast.
Venez tous jeunes filles et garçons, je vais vous raconter l'histoire de notre immigration ici au USA, de grands aventuriers de pays étrangers.
This is the French-Canadian Legacy News. I am Jesse Martineau. I will start this week's news by highlighting a recent post on the My French-Canadian Family blog. The post is entitled, "The Surprise North of the Border." Wait, there are how many Franco-Americans? This is an interesting article about some of the surprise coming from Canada with the enormous American reaction to Canadian Bill C-3. So for those who aren't familiar with Bill C-3, it's a change in the Canadian citizenship laws that will open up Canadian citizenship to many, many Franco-Americans, me very much included. It has been almost like humorous to see the reaction north of the border. Way more people have shown interest than the Canadians thought would be interested. Radio Canada even sent a TV crew down to talk to some people going through process of obtaining Canadian citizenship. I was pretty excited to be one of those people that they interviewed. And I just honestly get the impression that our Canadian cousins had no idea there was going to be this much interest from Franco-Americans in trying to connect and get the Canadian citizenship. For the next story, I'd like to highlight a great podcast, the Franco-American Pathways podcast. This is put together by the super talented folks at the University of Southern Maine's Franco-American Collection. In their most recent episode, the host talks with Dennis Ledoux about his book, French Boy, a 1950s Franco-American childhood. Now, Dennis is a super interesting person, and it's great to get his thoughts on the book. And they also talk about his thoughts on just memoir writing in general, kind of like the process of memoir writing. And coming from someone who is an absolute master of memoir writing, it is very, very cool to have this conversation. And then finally, I want to note a job opening, actually. The Acadian Village in Van Buren, Maine is looking for a paid summer manager to oversee day-to-day operations. It is a 20-hour-a-week job, and the manager would assist in selecting and training summer staff in May and early June, as well as getting the village ready for visitors. Definitely a plus if you have familiarity with Acadian culture or if you can communicate in French. So for those of you who don't know, the Acadian Village in Van Buren, Maine is a collection of 17 buildings, which is kind of cool, and is open to visitors from mid-June through mid-September, and it honors the history and sacrifices of Acadians who settled in the area in the late 1700s. And I find the Acadian story to just be incredibly interesting. Being up in Fort Kent, Maine last year really impacted my perspective on all things Acadian. The story is such a powerful story, and one that I really wish I had known earlier. I actually have to confess that I didn't know much of anything about the Acadian story prior to starting this podcast, and that is really too bad. This is a culture and a history that is different than the Quebec story, and it needs to be told just as often. And places like the Acadian Village in Van Buren, Maine are doing that. So if you happen to be up in that area, maybe have some interest, I think it is a really, really cool opportunity to be part of a really neat place. As for next week's episode, we get to speak again with a great friend of the podcast, Dr. Kathleen Stein-Smith. I mentioned in a previous news segment that I was fortunate to be on a panel to talk about Volume 2 of French All Around Us. Well, next week, we will be speaking to the person who is responsible for both volumes of French All Around Us. These books are an amazing way for Franco-Americans to tell our story. And to be able to have a second book was incredibly exciting. So we will talk all about this book, some of the thought processes that went into deciding to have a second book, some of the authors of this second book. So next week's episode, we're talking all about French All Around Us, French language and the Francophone culture in the United States, Volume 2, with the great Dr. Kathleen Stein-Smith. Can I ask you a bonus question now? Because I think we need to have a bonus question.
Don't make it too tough.
No. This one's a complete softball because I think it's incredibly cool. And that is, can you talk about what is L'Ordre de Palme Académique? For those who might not be familiar with that amazing honor you received, I think it'd be very cool for the audience to know what that is all about.
You know, the Ordre des Palmes Académiques is a decoration given by the French government to French nationals and people around the world for basically in recognition of what they have done to promote French language and Francophone culture. Now, there are many decorations that the French government gives. We all hear about like the Légion d'honneur, for example.
Sure. Yeah.
And there are many others. There's the Ordre de Mérite. But the academic palms is actually the oldest one, founded by Napoleon in, I think it's 1808.
That's wild.
Now, there could be a historian at the Palms who's going to correct me on something, but I think I've got this right.
Sure.
But that's why it was such a tremendous honor to really be honored twice. First as a chevalier back in 2017.
Which
and
is
then
insane to begin with. That's so
yes,
cool.
Yes, absolutely. And to be honored again in 2022 as an officier. And, what it does really, though, it's an honor. And some people might say, it's in recognition of past accomplishments, current accomplishments, but it also is a tremendous motivating factor.
Oh, I'm sure.
When you realize the company that you're in, great people, scholars, educators, language activists, and you realize the importance of the work of keeping French language and all of the values and the history that it embodies, when you realize the importance of keeping that alive in the world and keeping that alive here in the United States in our public conversation, I think that's so important. And of course, the ceremony, both ceremonies were at the Villa Albertine in New York, which is a very inspirational location. Basically adjacent to the French consulate and just down the street from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And it is really, you see the dedication of the people who work for the French government in safeguarding and promoting and in communicating the value of their culture. I cannot say enough about like the dedication of all of these people. Wonderful work that they do. I'm happy to say that the Villa Albertine is a very, very busy place on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, opposite, of course, from Central Park. It is usually a happening place. Lots of events, a bookstore that has a gorgeous, like, beautiful domed ceiling. People come there. I think sometimes people come there to like hang out. It's like a cool place. Sure. And I think that is exactly what we want people to feel about French. That French language and culture is that cool place. Whether you're 5 or you're 15 or you're, on the older side, it is that cool place for all of us to hang out. The great ideas, the beautiful poetry, the elegance and style, the history, all of that.
Well, this is just an amazing honor, very well deserved. I remember talking to Joseph Dunn, one of the authors from the first book,
yes,
about
yes.
when he got the Chevalier. That I'm pretty sure if I was ever to win that, I would just wear my insignia everywhere. It would be in court, it'd be on the beach, it wouldn't even matter. And if anybody gave me a hard time, I'd let them know what was up. But that is just so cool for you guys to be recognized by the government of France for the amazing work you have done and continue to do. And I cannot even imagine how motivating that must be to keep going. That is so cool.
I think it's important work, and people like you are making it move forward in our country here.
Hope so. That's the goal. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining, Kat.
Thank you, Jesse.
Now our fathers look at us and sigh with despair, to think that everything they love we simply do not share. But the spirit never dies, our culture will survive. Each of us must choose how much to keep alive. Each of us must choose how much to keep alive.
Special thanks to Josie Vachon for providing the music. You can find more about her at josievachon.com. This podcast was produced and edited by Mike Campbell. If you have any questions or comments, please email us at fclpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at FCL Podcast for more information about the topics discussed. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this episode.